lay this rose in remembrance of Theodora Cohen.
Syracuse University, New York State. A memorial service for 35 students who died on Pan Am 103.
I lay this rose in honor of Nicole Elise Boulanger.
The ceremony is watched by two people who became friends because of a mass murder. An American woman whose daughter was on the plane, and the Lockerbie ambulance man who found her body. Over the years, George White and his wife formed a close bond with Suzanne Miazga's mother.
I met his wife, Alma. She was a beautiful lady. Her and I corresponded back and forth by email for a while. Every time I went to Lockerbie, I'd stop and make sure I seen George. And about 6 years ago, Alma passed away. Then after that, I've been to Lockerbie 17 times. And every time I went, I make sure I talked to George, and he drove me around and stuff like that. And we love each other.
Yeah,
yes.
we do.
She had no control over it, but where her body fell, I think it was all meant to be, and because no other bodies fell around in the spot where she fell, and I think it was meant to be.
Only one man was convicted of murdering Suzanne and her friends, Abdel Basset al-Megrahi, now terminally ill with cancer and asking to go home to die. The announcement went out live across American news networks. The Scottish government had decided against transferring Megrahi to a Libyan prison.
Mr. al-Megrahi now faces a sentence imposed by a higher power. It is terminal, final, and irrevocable. He is going to die.
The medical advice was that Megrahi might have less than 3 months to live, meeting the criteria for compassionate release.
In Scotland, we are a people who pride ourselves on our humanity. Mr. al-Megrahi did not show his victims any comfort or compassion.
Here we go, doors open.
But that alone is not a reason for us to deny compassion to him and his family in his final days. It is my decision that Mr. Abdel Basset Ali Mohamed al-Megrahi, convicted in 2001 for the Lockerbie bombing, now terminally ill with prostate cancer, be released on compassionate grounds and are allowed to return to Libya to die.
Die, you fucking fuck!
Our experience was one of the Scots being extremely strong and people with integrity. And so I truly was bewildered, absolutely bewildered.
There was some small satisfaction in having at least one Libyan in jail in Scotland for life. Well, life turned out to be 8 years.
I do feel he should have served his full term, definitely. I thought, this might be a little bit naive, but I thought the Scottish people were on our side. How could they do such a thing?
We asked the question of, if it was a compassionate release, why the hell wasn't he still in Scotland? And the answer was, it would have been too expensive to keep him in Scotland. It would have cost too much money. Now that's the world image of Scottish, not compassionate, cheap.
We have been in contact with the Scottish government indicating that we objected to this. and we thought it was a mistake.
Wearing body armour beneath a tracksuit, McGrahy shook hands with his captors and slowly climbed his way to freedom. Amidst the condemnation, there was support from church leaders, world figures like Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, and the father of one of the Lockerbie victims.
When I met him was just before Christmas in 2008. He gave me a Christmas card which he'd prepared before I went into the meeting with him in Greenwich Prison. And on the Christmas card he'd written, Dr. Swire and family, please pray for me and my family. Now, does that sound like the sort of thing that a raging mass murderer would do? I don't think so.
Libya had assured the Scottish government the return would be low-key. McGrahy was met by Colonel Gaddafi's son and Al-Amin Khalifa Fahima, the Libyan acquitted at the Lockerbie trial.
They fly him home like a hero and give him a hero's welcome, and they were waving Scottish flags. So this whole thing was made up. This whole thing was a state-sponsored event. Nothing happens in Libya unless people are told to do it. This was all made up. This was all planned ahead of time, and the family members are the butts of the joke.
The man whose government negotiated the prisoner transfer agreement eventually broke his silence.
There was no conspiracy, no cover-up, no double-dealing, no deal on oil, no attempt to instruct Scottish ministers, no private assurances by me to Colonel Gaddafi.
McGrahy refused to undergo the full range of medical treatment available to him in Scotland and started chemotherapy on his return to Libya. After 9 months, he'd lived longer than any other murderer granted compassionate release.
Now we find the compassionate release was bogus, that it wasn't close to the facts that he had 3 months to live. Why? Why was it bogus?
The latest in the long line of Lockerbie conspiracy theories was born when American senators, enraged by the Gulf of Mexico oil spill and McGrahy's survival, linked BP to his release.
I think all of us here in the United States were surprised, disappointed, and angry about the release. But the bottom line is that we all disagreed with it. It was a bad decision.
And let us not confuse the oil spill with the Libyan bomber. That wasn't a decision taken by BP, it was a decision taken by the Scottish Government.
The Scottish Government insisted it had no contact of any kind with BP, but it was lobbied by the Libyan British Business Council, whose members include the oil company. The Council's warning that McGrahy's death in prison would harm UK-Libyan relations was repeated by Libyan officials in 5 meetings with the Scottish Government. When asked about the letter a year later, Mr McCaskill said it had been sent to the First Minister. He corrected his mistake when it was shown to him, then said Alex Salmond had replied.
It was rebuffed firmly and squarely by the First Minister, taken away from me so that I would not be coloured in any form. So you're correct, the letter came to me, but the response went back quite firmly from the First Minister of Scotland to say that this would be dealt with by the laws of Scotland, not subject to any lobbying.
The reply had in fact been sent by Mr McCaskill. The message, however, was exactly the same. McCaskill denies that when he met McGrahy in prison they struck a deal that the Libyan would drop his appeal in return for his release.
There's loads of stories about McGrahy. There's a veritable industry out there, as there is about whether Elvis Presley is alive and working in some chip shop in Fife. The note of the meeting is on the government website, and I never at any stage have suggested to him that he should drop his appeal.
The medical advice that freed McGrahy from prison came under fresh scrutiny. The cancer specialist consulted by the Scottish Government had said McGrahy had just months to live, but none would back the 3-month prognosis. An expert in the field understands their reluctance.
I personally never make predictions about how long people are going to live because in all the 25 years or so that I've been looking after these patients, when I have tried to guesstimate how long they're going to live, I'm always amazed by how much longer they actually live.
The prognosis that triggered the release came from the Director of Health at the Prison Service, Dr. Andrew Fraser, who noted that McGrahy had undergone a significant decline just days after he asked to be freed. 21 years ago, Professor Anthony Basuto led the pathological investigation at Lockerbie. He supervised the post-mortems of the victims, witnessing firsthand the horror of the bombing. But he backs Megrahi's release on medical and moral grounds.
If this person had stayed in prison, he would have been dead in months, possibly even within 3 months of him being assessed. He was at that stage where he has given up on life. It's a very fine balance, a balance between being, as I say, extremely compassionate and merciful, and demanding your full pound of flesh in terms of retribution for a very heinous crime.
A consultant who examined Megrahi in prison for the Libyan government says his return home gave him a new lease of life.
I think the reason he's survived so long is that he went back to a very different environment than where he came from in Scotland. He went back into his family house, surrounded by his children, his wife, mother, and in a caring environment. And I think that does prolong cancer patient survival.
The man who freed Megrahi has no regrets. He says he followed the rules and acted on the advice of trusted officials.
I authorised it, I did so in good faith, and I believe that everybody who's been involved in this has also acted in good faith. It was my responsibility, and I stand by my actions.
Almost a year after Megrahi's release, Bob Monetti has returned to the town where his son's body was found.
It's been probably a little over 10 years since I've been here. It's certainly a place of comfort. All throughout the last 20 years, the heroes in this piece were only the Scots. The Brits were useless, the US government was pretty useless, but the Scots, the Scottish police, the Scottish prosecution really were wonderful. So it was a real something we could lean on, and it's not there anymore. And I can't imagine how we can get it back. We're all dying, and some of us may predecease Megrahi. Yeah, and he's a free man, and he killed 270 people.
Abdel Basit al-Megrahi has always protested his innocence, but the verdict against him stands. He remains a convicted terrorist who killed 270 men, women and children. A mass murderer shown mercy and sent home to die.